parenting changes everything, your routines, your sleep, and yes, your sex life too. So let's talk about sex, baby. In this episode of the Oh Baby, We Got This podcast, I sit down with Jo Robertson, a sex therapist with a master's in medicine, to talk all things intimacy, relationships, and keeping the postpartum spark alive. We're diving into how hormones impact libido, overcoming anxiety around sex, and fun ways to reconnect with your partner even when you're running on no sleep. Jo shares expert tips, including how to spice things up a little, like sending a cheeky pic, which can reignite some passion. So if you're wondering when the spark will return or just need a little confidence boost, this one's for you. Let's dive in. So welcome to the Oh Baby podcast. I'm Angela, founder of Oh Baby, and today I get the privilege of talking with Jo Robertson, an experienced sex therapist with a Master's of Science in Medicine, specializing in female, well, also family stuff.
Also
female sexuality, postpartum intimacy, infidelity and betrayal, and the cultural influence of relationship expectations and norms. Jo's particularly passionate about the impact of media and culture on relationships and sexual well-being from childhood to adulthood. And beyond private practice, she actively contributes to government initiatives and community education, aiding families and professionals in navigating the effects of technology and sexualized media on young people. Jo, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. Jo has delivered a TED Talk and is an international speaker on topics of intimacy, relationships, and wider sexual culture, alongside having recently been one of the relationship experts on Married at First Sight New Zealand. Wow. Welcome, Jo, my famous friend.
I think that's considered like kind of E-grade fame.
E-grade. Well, do you know what? I have this grading system, I guess you would call it, if we're going with the grading thing. Celebrities are E grades for me. You are like an A grade for me. Like people that are intelligent, who have worked their ass off to get where they are, who are influencing the world in a much better and much more positive way than, like you're my A grade.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. That's a great start to my day.
I once got a text from a friend who said all these nice things to me, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is the best start to the day.
Yeah, it's good. So, yeah.
A grade, Jo. There you go.
I appreciate it.
I was talking to a friend about people that have influenced you in your life, and yeah, mine are not celebrities.
No, that's true.
Yeah. So yeah. And if anyone is listening and doesn't follow Jo on Instagram and social, your Instagram is at Sex Therapist
Jo. Yeah, Sex Therapist Jo. So really funny backstory about that. I was overseas somewhere talking to someone, and there were lots of kids in the background, and they said, "What do you do?" And I said, you can just Google me later, less appropriate for the setting. It's not always okay for me to talk about my work. And so they Googled me, and then the next day they said, I came across your social media. And they said, but it was so weird because the first time I looked at it, all I saw was Sex the Rapist Jo.
Oh no.
I know. And then they said, now I just can't unsee it. And I had never, ever seen that before.
Oh, dear.
And now I also can't unsee it.
Oh, and now everyone who's listening to this can't unhear it.
I know, it's true. And so I thought for a long time coming about just changing it to Jo Robertson. So if by any chance somebody listens to this in like a year's time and they can't find Sex Therapist Jo, then it might just be Jo Robertson.
Oh, very good. Very good. It's funny you say that. And I was doing some Christmas shopping over the weekend, and you know how when you're checking out, they say, oh, we got your email. Do you want to be a part of our loyalty club? Every store. This particular one, I thought, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And so I did, and my email's angela@obaby.co.nz, and oh baby, like,
yes, true.
and it was a menswear store. So the guy's like, so tell me about oh baby.
Oh, wow. Yes. Now I can't unsee that. Yes.
You can't unsee it. Yeah.
That's great. I've never thought about that before. I like it. It's got, well, it's kind of like,
It's
got
kind
a fun
of fun
element. My one is not fun.
Yeah, no, there's not
about that.
No, never. No. People need therapy with you after.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, let's not go there, and let's talk about postpartum and sex and relationships and all the good stuff that you contribute so positively in this world towards.
Happy to go there.
So what we did, as you know, because you put it on your Instagram page as well, was we put out there on Insta, on the socials, what are your questions for Jo? And so today we're going to be asking those and getting your answers on them.
Oh, great.
There you go. So we'll just get into it. Segue there. So one of the first questions that I have, I've also got them on my phone. So for those watching on YouTube, you will see me jumping on my phone. I'm not being antisocial. Mostly. Sex first trimester, this reader, person, follower, knows it's safe but is anxious that it will cause harm. How do I overcome that?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, particularly if it's a highly anticipated or desired baby. You know, there's this, maybe somebody's gone through fertility treatment. I find that there's a lot more caution, anxiety, sensitivity to what happens during pregnancy. And so first up, I just really want to validate that. Like any fears and concerns, they make sense in this season of life and they're really often heightened. And part of that is our instincts, our intuition, being protective. You know, this is the beginning of Mama Bear, and she's going, hey, keep my body safe at all times. So get that. I would say this is one of those situations where fear is taking control rather than truth. And it may be that you need to do a little bit more truth coaching and really focusing on, okay, what does the science say here? And what does the evidence suggest? So when people have anxiety, that's what I encourage them to do a lot is like, what's the evidence? So let's look to that and let that soothe us. So in first trimester and really through pregnancy, the whole time, unless you've had a medical professional say you can't have penetrative sex, you absolutely can. So at the end of the vagina, there's the cervix, and that is like a protective barrier, if you will. And what it does is it allows semen through to get pregnant, but apart from that, it blocks anything from going up. So it's keeping a cap on things, and it's squishy and soft, and so it acts as like a really lovely good barrier to anything being harmed in the process. So if, like I said, a medical professional has said to you, don't, then absolutely listen to that. Otherwise, the evidence suggests that you can. If you've got extra levels of concern, you can use what's called an O-nut, which is a series of silicone, really soft, squishy donuts. They look like very, very small donuts, and they can sit, you can roll them essentially onto the base of the penis, and you can put as many on as you want. And what it does is it will mean that there's shallower penetration, but it will still feel just as good because the majority of nerve endings on the penis are at the head. So the actual shaft itself doesn't require a lot of sensation for pleasure. So it'll feel just as good for the other person, and it might help you with your anxiety. So that's a really great tool. It's also good for people who've had prolapse or they've got a short vagina, and they might also have more sensitivity at the cervix, so they don't want anything going near it or hitting it. And the ONA as a product is a really, really great solution. So you can it's literally OHNUT, like oh baby. And and you can Google that and buy those. if it's really overwhelming you, your concerns, your fears about this, then you're probably not going to have a good time. So if you want to take that pressure off, then just don't have penetrative sex and just enjoy all the other things you can do. Because we know that stress depresses libido and pleasure. And so it does, at least for most people. And so if you're sitting there stressed and anxious, your muscles are more likely to tense up. It's more likely to be uncomfortable, but you're less likely to be in the moment and experience pleasure. So it might be a case of just pushing pause on certain acts and embracing others more. So that's lots of different kind of information and ideas.
Yeah, that's really good. You're like a professional.
Imagine.
I actually really love that. That is such a good answer. Thank you, Jo. Okay, next question. How do you talk about sex? Talk about when sex has got a little boring, or how do you start it different?
Yeah. Yeah, so a few different ideas here, because it absolutely does do that. And I just want to normalize that. So if you're in a relationship that you've been together for a long time, and I'm going to say, let's say over 5 years, it's highly likely that things do go through phases of being a bit boring and or getting into like a really heavy pattern. And that pattern was probably set for a really good reason at the beginning. And that pattern probably served you pretty well. So it might be that you both experience pleasure in certain ways. And as a result, you developed a routine that meant that you both experienced pleasure in the way that you wanted. Great. Okay. Now the pattern isn't working for you. So we change it up. There's this quote that I love, and it's monotony lulls the mind to sleep. And that's what we see with, babies as well, is that when you use the same kind of sleep cues or rhythms, they are more likely to respond, like, oh, this bath means that sleep comes soon. And so that's what it does in our sex life as well, is if we get too monotonous, we can actually get kind of lulled to sleep metaphorically. We stop being excited. We stop kind of being curious and interested. The body is really heightened to novelty. And I do not mean new partners. So that's really important for people to know. Sometimes people go, oh, okay, so like we should introduce more people. No, the couples that I work with are attempting to be monogamous, not always successfully, but we absolutely are focusing in this podcast on monogamous couples. So what we do is we bring novelty in through different acts and different kinds of initiation. What I encourage couples to do is actually take turns. And so not just one person is always initiating, because that's actually quite a heavy burden to bear, and is more like it often means that one person is more likely to experience rejection in the relationship than the other. So ideally you take turns and introduce one new thing each time. And it might not be like a new thing that you've never tried in your whole life, but something you haven't done for a couple of months. And that might be, the way that you start. So a really fun thing to do is undress each other in the shower. So go into the shower and actually remove your clothes in that setting. So you're not spending any extra money. You're not buying a new toy. You're not buying chocolate body sauce or anything. You're just changing the setting and changing the pattern. It could be that you start with a massage. It could be that you start with a different kind of toy. It could be that you start with different sensations. It could be that you try a new position. Whatever it is, try and introduce something slightly different each time, because the body will respond to that novelty. If you know that when you're driving a car, that the route you go is the same every single time, and you go to that same destination over and over again, like you've probably all experienced this. Your mind is basically blank.
Yes.
You don't even notice like when you turned and when you didn't, because it's so kind of intuitive.
Yes.
And you're not heightened to the surroundings, and you're not focused on what's going on. And so we want to do that. We want to bring a heightened sense of pleasure and anticipation. So we introduce novelty where we can. Yes. Just thinking about something else.
Yeah.
For our heterosexual couples, I have this, I guess, like pet project that I always want people to try, which is that I want them to remove penetration for 2 months.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, so I just want them to take it off the table. Because often the pattern that heterosexual couples get into is like they develop this default where penetration is the sex.
Yeah.
And if they haven't had it, or particularly if the male partner hasn't ejaculated, they think that sex hasn't happened. Like it wasn't a sexual encounter. And they kind of write it off as being a failure almost. And how I think I feel like then what we're doing is we're really rejecting creativity and we're rejecting play and we're making one person more important than the other. And we're elevating one behavior over all the others. Like that's the only one that counts. It's actually the one where females experience the least amount of pleasure as well.
Yeah.
So we lose something really, really great when penetration is the sex. So when you remove it for a decent amount of time, creativity really sparks.
Nice.
And there's much more pleasure to be found.
So it's what else are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And people, when I say that, they're like, what would we do? And that is a key sign you need to do it.
Yeah.
I think,
exactly.
I think for, couples who are having penetrative sex, it would be great if, at least a third of the time they didn't have penetrative sex in that time.
Yeah.
And it became creative. You didn't know the path you were going to take. You didn't know the final destination. Both people's pleasure were equally important to each other. There wasn't a sense of tick or fail.
For that to work well, there's got to be good communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm liking this. I'm not liking this. How do you feel about this? It's all the questions, the curiosity, keeping curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that people do is they often know quite a lot about each other that that is just really unspoken.
Yeah.
So I'll say that I'm using a stereotype, but often in a couple, a guy will say to me, I know she's not really into it. Like I can feel the difference.
Yeah.
And it's not spoken. One person that like the female partner, for example, might think they're doing a really great performance. They might think that they're not communicating any difference, but they really are. Because you feel in someone else's body when they're really, really present to you and they really desire you and if like they're there.
Yeah.
But it goes unspoken. And I think it would be so great if we could speak it out a little bit more. Hey, I feel like you're not fully into this. Is there anything that could help?
Yeah.
Or I feel like a lot of the time when we have sex, it doesn't seem like you're super, super into it. Are there times when you feel more into it? And how could we do that more?
Yeah. So these are kind of pre-bedroom questions. Bedroom. That's not saying everything.
No, but it's vernacular.
Yeah. But it's finding time together to have those kind of conversations as well, and being close enough to engage with that. Yeah,
and that is really scary. I don't want to minimize that for people, that it's scary to talk about sex because everybody's fearing criticism and rejection.
Yeah, I guess if you're in like a committed relationship, you've got that kind of base level, foundation, but it still doesn't kind of take away from that fear.
Yeah.
But so that commitment there. So it's like, okay, I've just got to push past.
Yeah. And reframing it as, when somebody brings up sex to you or they ask you a question, they talk about it out loud, even if that's saying something slightly challenging, it's actually the pursuit of you.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
So they're really pursuing relationship. They're wanting it to be better. And that's ultimately an act of romance. the easier path is to not say anything, to not ask questions, to let everything go unspoken. But that's not really pursuing each other. That's just letting things lie and not attempting change.
So that's actually a really good mind shift in how you think about it as well. It's like, okay, I need to be fair. I'm pursuing connection, pursuing intimacy, pursuing the romance, and spicing things up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, just building pleasure. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be like when people think of spicing things up, they think like, oh, it's got to be kinky or something. And I just sort of.
But if everything's vanilla,
exactly.
Cinnamon.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever is really hot. Chili.
Yes, totally.
We're talking cooking now. Excellent. Awesome. Okay, have we answered that question? So how do you start it different? So there you go. Different.
The other thing,
penetrative sex off the table. Yeah,
and introduce something different each time. The other really quite fun game that I really encourage people to enjoy is the 3-minute game. So this is where it's about turn taking. And the first 3 minutes, one person asks the other person, how would you like me to touch you? And that person might say, I want you to scratch my back, or I want you to run your fingers down my arm. So it doesn't have to be genital touch. How would you like me to touch you? And then next 3 minutes, the other person does it, and literally set a timer. So this is not a forever game. It loses its purpose actually if you just let it flow. Yeah. So 3 minutes, how would you like me to touch you? Next one, how would you like me to touch you? And we're into our third 3 minutes, and it's how would you like to touch me?
Oh.
Yeah. So we're shifting the pleasure to the toucher, but it's what do they desire to do to you? Now, of course, this has to be consensual, so it still has to be something you're comfortable with. But it often does encourage us to break a little bit more from the mold.
Yeah.
And also learn what the other person really likes.
Yeah.
So that's taking that stuff from unspoken to spoken. And then you do the fourth 3 minutes the same. So how would you like to touch me? And each person has had a turn doing each thing. It is amazing what can happen to a couple if they play that game, because so much expansion can happen. Both people's pleasure are highly prioritized. No one act is prioritized over another. And I find that it takes people to a lot more pleasure because they're also introducing more novelty. And the timing of it, like the 3 minute thing, is really, really powerful. It means that if you're doing something that you're not used to, you know that it's not forever. So you're like, I'm comfortable giving that a go.
Yeah.
But it also means that if you're receiving the pleasure you like, or you're giving the pleasure you like, that you know you've got 3 minutes, and it's like this kind of heated little moment.
Yeah.
And so I find couples often want to play that game twice, and lots of good experimenting and enjoy to be had.
That's a good aim. Excuse me. That's a good one. Well done. Just going on to we got one of the questions that came through, which would relate to the example of getting undressed in the shower, was around body changing after baby, being really body conscious, not really wanting to have sex because they feel different. They're not really liking their body now. How does a woman overcome that post-baby body, whatever we've got going on in our minds there? Yeah.
So a few different thoughts come to mind on that topic. One is that often it's amazing the power of exercise. So even if your body physically doesn't change shape from exercise, it is amazing what happens to the brain and confidence by just doing the thing. So I'm not saying that your body is going to or needs to even look any different. But the dopamine and confidence boost that people often get from doing the thing really changes the way they see themselves. And it's a little bit, I mean, it's not placebo because it's science, but it also is in that people feel better about their bodies when they're treating it well.
Yes.
That is a thing.
Yeah.
And I find it's also, for lots of couples, it's really attractive to the other person when they see their partner treating their body well, not being a certain shape, not looking a particular way, but treating their body well. And there's this attractiveness often in seeing someone work out or head off to the gym. I don't know. It's like a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah.
And so it's a thing about your own body, and it's often a thing in partnerships. So that's something to just consider is, do you want the confidence boost and the dopamine hit that comes with treating your body well? And because it really works. The second thing is that I did this poll on Instagram, and like over 800 people replied. And I asked if after your partner's body has changed, if it impacts your desire for them. And about 80% of people said no.
Yes.
I know.
That's
And
so
yeah, I know. And another 10% of people said they would prefer the previous body type, but it's not enough of an impact to change the way that they want them.
Mm.
And I think that that's really honest and real, and that happens both ways. That's not just about postpartum, because everyone's body changes as they age. My auntie was just telling me, she's like, it's amazing how things just rapidly get softer. And I really liked that as a phrase. Yeah. It's like, yeah, softness, and my mum always uses this phrase around lusciousness. And I really like it. She's like, oh, she's so lush.
Yes. Reframe it.
Yeah. And it's instantly
to soft and feminine and simple and beautiful. Love it.
And that stuff language is so important. Yeah. So that takes me to my next point, which is that the way you treat yourself, literally physically, as you touch yourself, and the words you do use will radically transform the way that your mind thinks about the body. Yeah. So it's just actually how the brain works. We lay down neural pathways with the words that we use and the behaviors that we do, and it will impact the way you see yourself. So the more often you look in the mirror and go, ugh, then that becomes the default response every single time. So often when people say, like, I just feel terrible about my body, I go, yeah, like, first up, that's an okay starting point. You don't have to all think your body is amazing all the time. Like, that's all right, as long as it's a starting point. And then I'll say, okay, well, how have you worked on that mindset? And so often they'll be like, I don't even know what I would do. And so they've built in almost like a concrete default response. And you have to break that concrete apart, one chip at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the only way to do that is with your words and your actions. So I encourage people to look in the mirror and say something different, to do things like affirmations on the mirror, like sticky notes anywhere they can. We do it when it comes to birth, right? And we seem to all go like, hey, yeah, that's a really powerful and effective thing to do. But when it comes to our body image, we go, oh, no, that won't really work. Like, why is it acceptable and successful in one area and not in another? And I think it's just that people feel embarrassed. So,
and we're all taught to be humble and we're self-deprecating.
Absolutely. It's actually more socially acceptable to be down on your body than it is to be positive about it. And so people feel embarrassed about putting things on the wall or on the mirror, like, you are luscious, you are sensual. They feel like that's a little bit icky and weird. But you probably did it about your birth. Yeah. And you would do it to your child.
Yeah.
And so do it yourself.
how we talk to ourselves, we would never talk to anyone else in this world. Well, hopefully, unless you're not a nice person.
Yeah.
In which case, maybe you should get some therapy.
Yes, absolutely. So that when it comes to physically, the way that you treat your body, I encourage people to get a really beautiful body lotion, one in the shower and then a moisturizer, and actually rub their body. Like really get comfortable with touching their body and feeling the love of that.
Yeah.
So like really getting in there and going like really like nourishing self.
Yeah. Nice.
Another little activity that people can do, and this is one that often people be like, oh God, no, I'm never doing that. But again, very effective, is just by yourself getting into some nicer underwear or being nude, taking photos and sensual photos. So put your body in more sensual positions and take photos. You don't have to share those photos. You don't have to send them anywhere. You can delete them afterwards. But what I want people to do is start to see their body through a different lens. Like,
yeah.
Like if you like take a photo of you being sexual, it doesn't have to include genitals, but then look at those photos and it's amazing like how beautiful you'll probably think they look, because that is how your partner sees you. That extra curve, like that extra large breast, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They still see that as sexual. Like my auntie said this to me. She's like, honestly, Jo, you could have pubes to your knees and they'd still be stoked you were naked. And I was like, it's so great.
Fantastic.
I know, because the partner is often just so happy that you're naked with them.
Yeah. Oh, this is good. And also, postpartum, there's not actually that much extra on you, really. It's just our perception of ourselves. Yes. That's changed, or the way something fits has changed because your tummy's still, shrinking or whatever else, but everything else is, so it's that perspective too. One thing that I really resonated with when you were talking there was just the fitness side of things. Like, and one way I changed my kind of view on my body was I had a body scan, like one of those
like an MRI?
In-body scans. So it does like your muscle and fat ratios and stuff like that. And what I did in terms of, because I've kind of, I had issues, still working on it. This wasn't my personal question, just saying, but it's a good question to have asked. But what I loved about it was it changed the way I thought about my body in terms of it being strong, and my focus wasn't on how fat I am or anything like that. It was, okay, how do I get my body stronger? How do I reduce my visceral fat? How do I make changes to my body that is healthy for me for the long term? And changing that perspective for me was just so empowering. And what I loved also about it was it turns out that my body's really muscly. But it meant that what I perceived to be what my goal weight should be based on BMI and all of that BS was totally different. And I needed to lose like way less weight than I thought I did, because most of my composition is muscle. So
wow. And there's that's an immovable object, Yeah.
Well, unless I want to lose muscle, but for like long term, perimenopause and everything like that, like muscle's really important. So it changed my mind on everything, and now I'm like just going after it. Anyway, that's cool contribution.
That's great. And there's so many positive voices to follow now on social media in terms of body positivity. I'm like just fully want to acknowledge I'm a small person, and so sometimes if I say something, it doesn't feel as influential as if somebody who's actually really navigated what it's like to be in a bigger body. And so I encourage you to find people on social media and online, or friends, who are doing this journey really well and who you really admire, and listen to the strategies they use, because they've obviously got there somehow.
Yeah, totally.
It's been successful. So yeah, hear them out and their advice.
So good. Okay. Next question. For context, 5-year-old and a 5-month-old, but have felt over hubby for about 3 years.
So over means lots of different things.
Yeah, what does that mean in this context?
Yeah. So being over them, I mean, the most significant cause of feeling over someone is the state of the relationship. And I've seen this over and over again, that you'll get a couple who maybe societally people would go like, hey, this is a really attractive person, or these are really attractive people, but they are way over each other because of the state of the relationship and nothing to do with how that person looks. And I'm like, sex has basically nothing to do with your appearance. And I at least get to see that out in practice.
Yeah, so true.
People who look all kinds of ways can have phenomenal sex. And people who look the way that we might assume is hot, passionate, great sex because of how they look can be having no sex at all, or be really struggling with each other. So being over someone is usually about the relationship. And I find that comes down to quality time, quality conversation, and touch, but non-sexual touch. So affectionate touch. The touch that still takes you out of roommate, but it's about feeling valued and pursued, not about being objectified as, an object of pleasure.
Yes, so good.
So quality time is not being on your phone. It can include watching TV and movies together, but if that's like, we grabbed a cup of tea and we sat down and ate chocolate and we're like, really, really focused on this time, it's not sitting and watching a movie together while someone is distracted, or while someone's working, while someone's on the phone texting their friend, while someone's scrolling social media. Like, that's not quality time. It's being fully present to the other person. Fun and play are really important. Integrating fun into your relationship, whether it's like literally a board game because you can't afford a babysitter to go out, which is 99% of the population, or cooking a meal together, making cocktails together, whatever it is that might just bring a few extra laughs, is so important.
Yeah.
And then, so it's quality time, quality conversation. It means talking about more than the kids. And talking about the kids can be quality if it's like how you're feeling about yourself as a parent.
Yeah.
How you're feeling about how you're doing as a family. Like, what are your aspirations for the future? What are your dreams for your children? Like, how are you hoping to get there? So when I mean not talking about the kids, it means like sports, life admin, the current struggles. It's more probably future focused, strengths focused, aspirational.
Yeah, nice.
Or highly reflective. And if you are thinking, I don't even know like what we have to talk about, then you might need to use a third party like an app. Or there's so many websites or apps that will offer questions for you to ask each other on a date night. And Dave and I have done this. Like, we've been together for 16, 17 years, I think. I'm not sure which one. And so there's a lot of topics that we've already covered.
Oh, yeah.
But so sometimes we've used apps on date nights just at home because there's no babysitters, so I'm in that 99% that, it's just at home, but we just ask each other a few questions, often really funny ones, sometimes sex related, and it's more just about a laugh and maybe learning about some quirks of each other that you haven't over the years, or how you've changed, because we all do.
Yeah. Well, a question could be, how have you changed?
Exactly. That's great. So it could be that you both commit to listen to a podcast a week. That's the same. And then you talk about it that whatever date night or intentional time you have.
Yeah.
So quality time, quality conversation, and then non-sexual touch. It is amazing the way that a relationship changes when you hug more often, or hold hands, or scratch each other's back, or like those mini moments. What I call change the culture of the relationship.
Yeah.
From being task oriented to being really connection oriented. So you're doing the dishes next to each other, or you're both helping cook, but then every once in a while you do a little back scratch.
Yeah.
That's what takes you from friends to lovers, That's
Love that.
the shift.
Yeah.
And we do that so well in early relationship and absolutely suck at it the longer the relationship goes on.
So true.
Yeah. So
Taken
this
for
is
granted, huh?
Yeah, this is a must, is keeping some of that culture, those little bits of spice and flavor in the relationship is so essential.
So in this particular question, and actually following on to the next one, I'll go to the next. I'll stay here. Okay, we'll stay here. I guess if you're over someone, or that's in your mind, how do you change, or what steps do you need to take to get into a place of motivation to change towards connection again? And I don't know, there's something internally that has to change too. And I will read the next question, because it kind of, it might not be what the question that we've just asked has, but there's possibly a similar answer. So the next question is, 2 kids and have the ick so hard for hubby. Is it over now? I miss and want sex, just not with him.
Mm.
So, and it just takes me back to, have you seen, it's on Netflix, and it's the rabbi and
Oh yeah, nobody wants this?
Nobody wants this, and she gets the ick, and then he unicks it. I love that. You can unick. Yeah. So anyway, that's me answering, but only because I saw it in a TV show. How do you unick?
Yes.
How do you get rid of the ick? How do you move towards the other? And you get the gist.
Well, if you're using that TV show as a reference, the way that they unick that, that they move through it, is by talking about what it was that created the moment.
Yeah, true.
They actually remain completely respectful of each other. So they talk about it as adults rather than as children. Yeah. It's not like blaming, degrading, mean, which can exist within adult relationships, definitely. And she also sees the other parts of him that she originally valued.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So she kind of goes from micro to macro.
Yeah.
She goes from detail to character, and sees the heart and the intention of the other things that he has done. And so often we actually need to do that too. Yeah. Go from micro to macro. Okay, what is this thing I don't really love? What are all the other things I really do?
Yeah.
What, if they weren't around, would I really miss? And that could be as simple as the way that they take the rubbish out, or the way that they provide financially, or the way that they prioritize our family, make sure that they always turn up to everything and show respect and kindness. So, those things just by themselves, aren't enough to sustain a relationship, but it's shifting from detail to character. Like, what are the other things that you really love? I think the postpartum piece is important here. So in both of those scenarios, they've got a baby. And when I say a baby, I mean somebody who's under 1. And when we've got that baby, there's actually a lot of chemicals running through our body that is different from all the other times. So when you're breastfeeding, for example, you get a release of oxytocin, and we call that the love drug. Oxytocin is the same chemical that's released when you orgasm. And it's a bonding chemical. It's something that draws you to the other person, this feeling of closeness. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that when you're feeding your baby, you're actually getting your tank filled up all the time from that baby. It's also being drained in other ways. So I'm not saying that you're like sitting there like a fluffy bunny. Like, that's definitely not what's happening. But you're getting that bonding, that connection, that love kind of warmth. And your partner is not. And so you don't need it from them in the way that you used to. And there's a protective element of that too. Like, you're now oriented towards the baby and protecting that baby. That is important evolutionarily, like from an evolutionary perspective, because your role as the feeding parent was to protect that child. That was necessary. We don't live in that culture anymore, so we can broaden our kind of thinking a little bit, but there is a chemical thing happening there. You also have significantly depressed libido. So your estrogen has plummeted really well through the ground. You know, it's the same thing that happens when you're perimenopausal, because your body isn't trying to make babies anymore. It's actually trying to protect itself. That's what the body's doing. And so there are chemical things happening that you are not in full control of. So your mental game actually has to work a little bit harder, because your body is fighting against you a little bit when it comes to connection with your partner. So the postpartum season is quite unique in that way when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, interesting. Very good point.
Hopefully that's helpful for people to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Now that's different from what was going on before.
Yeah, because it can change just all the stuff, really. And you know, even having that as a conversation is really important.
Yes. Yeah. So this is why
guys too, or their partners too.
Totally.
Yeah.
I have got this postpartum sex course, and
everyone should sign up to.
Which everyone should sign up to. But one of the main reasons,
whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go, and then we'll put a plug in.
We'll get there too. But one of the reasons that I really wanted to do that was that I found that lots of mums or primary caregivers would listen to all this content. So they would listen to podcasts, or they would read articles, or they would be following me on social media, but they really struggled to get their partners to engage in the content in the same way. And they couldn't necessarily afford therapy, or they didn't feel as comfortable doing that. And so they needed some other thing at home that meant that the professional, me in this situation, could explain it.
Yeah.
And so it's designed for couples to do together, or, you know, you can listen to different parts and talk about it, however you want to do it. But it's designed for committed couples in the postpartum season, which is really unique, to understand what the hell is going on in the body, in the heart, and in the mind, and how that's shaping your relationship.
That's worth the investment, 100%. 100%.
I think so too.
I agree. Everyone. So if we want to sign up to the postpartum course, how do we do that, Jo?
Great. So it's all on my website, jorobertson.org, or you can see the links through social media, through Instagram, or you can go to courses.jorobertson.org, and then you'll see them there. So that lots of pathways. You could also pretty much just Google it and you'd probably find it. I wanted to make it really accessible. So it's $79 New Zealand dollars, which is much, much, much cheaper if you live in places like America, where your dollar goes further. But it's about, that's like a third of the price of what you'd spend at a therapist. And you're going to get, hours more content than you would get. And it's really, really hard to access therapists at the moment because the demand is so high, because a lot of couples are really struggling. It's long wait lists. And I think that you might as well try something like this at home, see how far it takes you. And if you're struggling more, then yeah, absolutely seek that unique specialized help.
Yeah, awesome. I love that idea that how about do the course first, see where if there's any issues that afterwards are raised that you still need help with. But, you know, you can do it in your own time. You can take as much time as you want on different videos or whatever. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great investment. Okay, next question. Is it normal for penetration to feel a lot tighter or different 2 C-sections down?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is because you have that low estrogen. So whether you have a C-section or vaginal birth, you have the same impact in your hormones. People often think like, oh, if I have a C-section, my vagina isn't impacted and therefore I'll be fine with sex. And it's the same in terms of the hormonal response. So if it feels tight, sore, uncomfortable, you are also probably drier, not self-lubricating in the same way. So you need a really great lubricant. I find that people's libido, self-lubrication, experience of pleasure increases over the postpartum period of 2 years. But if you have another baby 2 years after your last, then, you know, you're obviously extending that period of time out. So yeah, you're more likely to need extra lube, good quality that lasts as opposed to dries up quickly. And then you're more likely to experience that kind of tightness and discomfort because of that. And because your estrogen is low, yeah, it just can make it more uncomfortable. So you want to go slower. Fast-paced sex is not necessarily your friend at the moment. So you need more foreplay. Think 20 to 30 minutes, not 5 to 7, which is what most people do. And so that your body has a chance to be more aroused before penetration. The over 20 to 30 minutes, what the vagina does is something called tenting. It's like such a weird name. But think as you put a tent up, it gets longer and wider. So the vagina for most people is not ready within 5 minutes. And so it's more likely to be uncomfortable. It takes time to allow for something to be inside of it. So give it the time that it needs and it's more likely to work out better. That's just science. That's just the reality.
There you go. Science. Hey, we have some more questions, but I know we need to wrap it up now. So we might have to invite you again onto the podcast to ask these questions and just hear from you because you're actually so amazing and world-changing. You're a world changer, Jo.
I'm happy to do part 2.
Yay. So website, jorobertson.org.
Yep, .org.
At Sex Therapist Jo. To
That's
be
it.
confirmed in the future, we know. And everything else. I have our latest issue of Oh Baby magazine here, the summer issue. It's got our Oh Baby Awards winners in it, and so that will help with your baby buying and shopping, as voted for by thousands of parents. But also there's an article by Jo in there as well around gender
disappointment.
Yeah. There you go. It's actually such a beautiful and such a real, I love, this is one thing I really love about you, Jo. Okay, we'll wrap it up, but just how real and honest and authentic and like just real you are. I love that. And it's such an awesome quality and such a good example to us all. So I've loved talking with you and thank you for your time and looking forward to session number 2 with you.
Me too.
Okay, thanks and see you.
Bye.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Oh Baby, We Got This podcast. If you loved it, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a review and share it with your parenting crew. If you're wanting more Oh Baby, then dive into Oh Baby magazine, available in digital and print format for expert advice, must-have products, parenting tips, fashion, recipes, interiors, and lifestyle inspiration. Plus, jump online and subscribe to our email newsletter for weekly pregnancy and baby updates right through to school years. You can sign up online and explore expert content, real parent stories, and so much more on obaby.co.nz. And hey, don't miss out. Check out our YouTube channel for even more parenting goodness. And we'll see you next time because trust us, you've got this.